Welcome to Brooker Ceramics, and we're on day 33 of learning how to throw on a potter's wheel. This week I've been making some nice ramen bowls, you can see here, with a nice shallow but wide shape. I've also really enjoyed cutting in the feet, as you can see in the back. And this week, for the first time, I've managed to get a potter's mark, so you can see my maker's mark is stamped into the bottom there. So I'll be talking you through all the processes that I've taken from start to finish to creating this bowl, and some of my insights and recommendations so that when you're making your own bowls at home, you can follow along. So if you like this content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I hope you enjoy the video. So I've got my clay ball weighed out now and ready to throw. And what I want to be doing is I'm going to throw it on the wheel, cone and center it. I'm going to open up the clay, and then I'm going to start creating that nice bowl form. I'm trying to go for something that's relatively thin this week, so the clay walls will be quite thin, which will mean a lot less trimming will be required later. So let's zoom you in, and we're going to take a look at that now. I used to find coning and centering quite stressful and the most difficult part of throwing on the potter's wheel. But over the past couple of weeks, I've really started to gain my confidence, and I'm finding that I'm coning and centering much quicker than before. And this means that I can get the clay spinning really centrally within a couple of attempts, which reduces the amount of water I need to apply to the clay ball. And this helps it keep its shape. Every time I throw, I'm able to throw with more and more clay without the clay deforming or being thrown off the wheel. This is probably one of the largest bowls that I've thrown in a while, but also I'm finding that the shape's getting tidier and neater and becoming more refined through each process. I find when I open up the clay like this, the little swirls that are created inside of the clay ball really mesmerizing, and often think, should I just leave them in to kind of be a pattern or something of interest? But of course, I'll need to compress the base, and this allows me to ensure the bottom of the clay vessel is really strong, so that when I remove it and trim later, it doesn't warp and holds its shape. As you can see here, my pulling is becoming much more confident, with me getting that bowl shape in pretty much one outward pull. I've learnt new techniques such as removing the excess slip with a wooden kidney, as well as removing the inside of the clay bowl itself with a sponge. Of course, tidying up the rim is really important because this tells the viewer how thick and refined the clay vessel is. A really clunky rim can make a vessel look very unattractive. Every time I throw, I learn a little bit more about the clay, and I'm finding that my newer vessels are much thicker than my initial ones. And whilst this might sound counterintuitive, it's actually a sign of progress. It gives me the option to come in and trim more away if I need to, or if I want to keep the vessel quite thick. So now that I've got the basic ramen bowl shape, I'm going to let it set aside for a couple of days to dry out. Then I'll come back in and just burnish the inside of the bowl. I'll then flip it and let the base dry out. And by then, it'll probably take a week with the weather being as cold as it is at the moment. So hopefully next weekend, I can come in and trim up the bowl and do the finishing touches, such as cutting in the rim so that you can rest your chopsticks on it, things like that. So I'm going to put this aside and we'll come back in a few days and see how we're getting on. So a few days later, and the bowl is starting to dry out and become leather hard. What I want to do now is a really important step, which is begin to burnish the inside of the bowl itself, and then flip it and put it away in storage so that the base can dry out too. These steps are really important because previously I wasn't able to burnish the inside of the bowl because the clay was just too soft. And if I leave it much later, we don't really want to be trimming the inside of the bowl. It can be quite tricky. So coming in with a wooden tool when it's kind of semi-leather hard is a really good way of just burnishing and finishing up the inside. Because this has a slight base to it, it's important that we flip it over so that base dries out, so that when we come to trim it later, it's ready to be trimmed and not too soft. And this process allows the clay to dry out really evenly, and it reduces any chance of it warping or cracking. So let's head over to the potter's wheel and give it a go. I found with the change of weather and things getting colder that it's not as easy to remove the vessel away from the wooden bat, and often have to resort to flipping it over and scoring it like this. It's not ideal, and it's often a bit more challenging to ensure that I don't remove too much away, but we're able to get the bat off. I found burnishing the inside of the bowl midway through the drying process, whilst the inside is still quite tacky, allows me to create a really nice finish, but also to ensure that the bowl is a nice round shape. So that's the inside of the bowl burnished. Now it's time to put it back on the wooden bat and set it aside for a few more days to continue to dry out leather hard. So now the bowl's flipped over, it's ready to be trimmed on the outside. So we're going to set it aside probably for about another 5 days in its own container. And that will allow for this base here to catch up to the same level of dryness as, say, the rim itself, which will dry out much thinner, much quicker because it's thinner. So let's set it aside and we'll come back and begin the trimming process. So a couple of days later, and the ramen bowl is nice and leather hard. I'm really pleased that we spent that time burnishing the inside of the bowl because it looks really nice and really smooth. It also helped us just finalise that shape to ensure that the bowl is nice and round. So what we want to do now is come in, flip it over now that the base is dry, and begin trimming in the base and tidying up the exterior of the bowl. So I'll zoom you in and we'll take a look at that on the potter's wheel now. Trimming is my favourite part of the making process. I find it really therapeutic, removing clay bit by bit. And in particular, my favourite part is focusing on the join between the vessel and the foot, and then carving in the foot itself. I'm really drawn to clay vessels with tall feet that you can carve away these deep grooves into. And just like with the rim of the vessel, I'll spend a lot of time carving in the foot and making sure it's nice and delicate and even so that when the bowl is being used, it doesn't wobble. And here's the final piece. So thank you all for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.